Hello and welcome to your Learn to Curl. First, we're going to start out learning a little bit about the game of curling. Okay, in front of you, you see a diagram for a sheet of curling ice. We have 5 sheets on our curling ice, so they're all next to each other. A sheet of ice is about 138 feet long. You'll notice 2 bullseye targets, one at each end of the sheet. Those bullseyes are not called bullseyes, they are called houses. Okay? The house is very important in curling because that is the scoring zone for curling. All right, before we get started, the number one goal today, have fun. Okay? If you are not having fun, please talk to one of the instructors. We can adjust things, we can make things different, we can do something to make this game, hopefully, or today's experience, a little more enjoyable for you. Okay? Because we love curling and we want you to love it also. All right, let's talk about the actual game of curling. Curling was invented in the 1500s in Scotland, playing with rocks on frozen ponds and stuff like that, and we've gotten a little bit more high-tech now. Today, Today, curling is done with 42-pound polished granite stones. The rocks still come from Scotland, or most of the rocks come from Scotland. They're finely polished and they are concave so that only a little part of the rock is touching the ice to make as little friction as possible so that the stone will slide down 130 something feet, and it makes it a little easier to move it down that much. All right, that being said, how does a game of curling work? Well, most games we have 2 teams of 4 people. Okay, there are other versions, but for our sake, we're going to be talking about 4-person curling. Each person on a team will curl or throw or deliver 2 stones. Okay, and they will alternate throws with the other team. So the first person on team A will throw a stone, then the first person on team B will throw a stone. Then the first person on Team A will throw their second stone. Then the first person on Team B throws a second stone, and then the second person on Team A will throw their stone. And it keeps going like that until all 16 stones are thrown. Okay, we'll talk about the scoring later, but let's talk about how does it actually work when you're delivering a stone. Well, the first thing that happens is you will stand in this area right here, which is known as the hack. It is a anchored down starting block. It looks like a track and field starting block, and we use that to push off into a lunge position and slide down the ice in our delivery. Okay, if you want to see what that looks like, looks something like this. Okay, so this lady is delivering a stone. She is sliding on one foot in a lunge position. She is a right-handed curler, so the stone is in her right hand, and her left leg is underneath her body, supporting her, and her right leg is dragging behind her, and she's using that to keep her facing forward so she doesn't start rotating herself as she slides down the ice. You'll notice she's holding the broom to the side. That's helping stabilize her. Okay, her balance is really good, so she's barely putting that broom on the ice, and she's barely putting the broom's on the ice, but she's barely putting any weight on it. For us, for beginners, what we'll use is what's called a stabilizer. It's a little easier to use than a broom. You'll see what that looks like, but basically it has a handle on it and you can lean on it a little more than you would a broom. So, in a game of curling, the first person would stand in the hack. Let's pretend you're right-handed. You would put your right foot on this side of the hack, and your left foot would be right here on the ice. Now, because you don't have special curling shoes, you'll be stepping with your left foot onto a slippery thing that goes on the bottom of your shoe, and basically it is made of Teflon, and you will stand on top of that. When you push into a lunge position, that will be your lead foot, and you will be sliding on that. Okay? So you will push out from here, and you'll go into a lunge position. Your momentum will carry you and the stone forward. At some point, you will release the stone. The stone's momentum, and it's 42 pounds, will continue down the ice. You do have to release the stone before this line here, which is known as the hog line. Shouldn't be a problem for you today because most of you won't be able to slide to the hog line, but that is the rules. So the stone continues down the ice, and as it slows down, it will begin to curl one way or another, depending which way or which rotation we have put on the stone. Okay? The stone works like a steering wheel. So if I rotate the stone clockwise as I'm releasing it, as it slows down, it will go to the right. If I rotate it counterclockwise, it will fade to the left, okay, as it slows down. Now what happens is all 16 stones get thrown down the ice. Ideally, those stones will land up in this zone right here, which is the field of play. If a stone does not make it over the hog line on the other side, if it ends up in this area, it is taken out of play, it is removed from play and does not count. If it goes too far, and the stone goes through the field of play and out the back side, out this back line right here, then it is also removed from play. Okay, the only ones that count are the only ones we keep in play are the ones that stop in that section. All right, so you'll notice there's two sections it could stop in, really. It can stop in the house, as I said before, that's the scoring section, or it can stop in this white area in front of the house. This is called the free guard zone. It's what makes curling much more interesting. So if you put your first shot, most people try to say, oh, I'm going to put my first shot right there on what's called the button or the pin. That's the very center of the bullseye. So let's say you put a perfect shot right down there on the button. Well, the next team comes down and they just knock you right out. Well, that gets boring because it goes back and forth like this, and then the last person to throw ends up just knocking the last one out and sticking there, and that's not too exciting, nor does it require much strategy. So in order to make it a little more fun, we have what's called the free guard zone, this space I was just talking about. And usually in a game of curling, we will put our first stones into this free guard zone. Why might we do that? Well, because after we have those stones up, and by the way, those stones cannot be removed until the 6th stone is thrown in an end. When those stones are up there, your next shot might curl around behind that stone. So that's why the front stone is known as a guard. It keeps the other team from being able to directly knock your stone out of play. This is where the strategy comes in, okay, as well as the real finesse technique stuff you need to be able to do. All right, now, after all 16 stones have been thrown, you'll have stones here in the guard zone, you'll have stones hopefully in the house here, and all the teams or both teams will come down the ice and they will score that end. When we put all 16 stones, when we push all 16 stones down to one end, that is known as an end. And there are 8 ends in a game. Sometimes there are 10, depending on the type of curling you're doing. For today's purposes, we rent the ice for 2 hours, so our games end at 2 hours, regardless of how many ends you've played. Now, we'll talk about the scoring in a moment, but after these have been scored, all the rocks are pushed off the ice, and then we go in the other direction for end number 2. Now, the game is called curling because the stones curl. Okay, so how do you get a curling stone to stop where you want it to stop? Well, there's 3 things that are super duper important when you are curling, or when you're delivering a curling stone. The first thing, it's called hitting the broom. What we do to hit the broom is this. You will have a person down at the end of the ice, the person kind of in charge of the team. They are known as the skip. They are the ones who are thinking of the strategy of the game. They're the ones who are telling you what to do for your shot. So the first thing they do is they will put their broom down on the ice. That broom is your target. You will be aiming at that broom. So if you are sliding out here, you should be sliding straight towards that broom and releasing the rock straight towards that broom. That's number 1, hitting the broom. That's one of the 3 important things. The second important thing is that skip, the person down here holding the broom, they will also tell you which way to rotate the stone. That's very important because that's telling you, is the stone going to go to the right and end up over here? Or does the skip, for some crazy reason, want it to rotate to the left and end up over here? Okay, so hitting the broom and putting the correct rotation on the stone, very important. The third thing is probably the most difficult and requires the most practice. The third thing is how heavy you throw the stone. Okay? How hard you are pushing the stone. What's the speed? We call it the weight of the stone. If you throw it super duper heavy and super duper fast, that stone will stay straight as an arrow. That's great, but then it just goes out the back and it's worthless. Sometimes we do that when we're trying to knock out other color stones. Okay, so the stones from the other team. But as the stone slows down, that's when the rotation takes over and it curls. Now, here's why we might do this. Okay, as I was mentioning before, let's say there's a guard there. Your skip might put the broom right here and tell you that they want the stone to end up over here. So you'll slide out of the hack right at this, and the stone will curl, if you turn it clockwise, to the right. We use sweeping to affect the stone in 3 different ways. So let's look at the shot I was just talking about. We want the stone to end up right here behind this guard. Well, there's 3 things we can sweep for. One thing is we can sweep to drag the stone further. So if you watch the professionals, often as soon as they release the stone, their teammates are sweeping. They are sweeping to get the stone to travel further down the ice. Okay, so most professionals throw their stone a little bit short of what their target is. That way the sweeper can fine-tune it and sweep it to where it needs to go. Another thing you can do as a good sweeper is if I am standing on this side, and I have no body apparently there, but if that is me and I'm standing on one side and the stone is curling to the away from me, if my broom is sweeping at this angle right here, if I'm sweeping at that angle, that's sweeping with the curl, the way the rock is turning. That will help the stone curl more. So when the stone gets past this guard, I might sweep this direction so it curls more and ends up behind it. Or, sorry, I got to redraw this now. Let's say the stone is starting to curl and I don't want it to curl into this one. It's starting to curl too much and I need to stop it from curling anymore. If I'm on this side, or whoever is on this side, they can sweep in this direction with their broom, pushing into the curl. Okay, so the stone is trying to go this way and they are pushing the opposite direction. That will keep the stone straighter. Okay, it won't stay perfectly straight, but that will reduce the curl so that hopefully you can get past this guard before it curls. Okay, so that's the purpose of sweeping. All right, let's look at how do you score a game now? Well, scoring a game works something like horseshoes. When you get down, let's say all the stones have been thrown, and this is how many stones are actually in the house. There's 9 stones in the house. Only one team scores each end. So let's look at who would be scoring this end. The team that's going to score, just like horseshoes, is the team with the closest stone. Well, the closest stone to the middle is that yellow stone right here. So that gets 1 point for yellow. The second closest, and yellow can keep accruing points as long as they are the next closest stone. So they get 1 point for that one. The second closest stone is this one. So they get another point for that one. The next closest stone is this red one. So we are done scoring. Yellow ends up with 2 points in that end. Okay, so only one team scores, and they score however many they have closer than the closest stone of the other teams. Okay, let's look at another end. Okay, you decide. What do you think the score of this one is? Okay, hopefully you said 1 for red. Red is the closest stone. Okay, you can see that one's the closest to the center, and then the second closest is yellow. Doesn't matter that yellow has 5 in there. It's just red is the closest. They will score 1 point. Now, there is something I want to tell you about this one. So if there are 5 yellow in here and the very last throw is the red one, you can see how important that last throw is. There were 5 yellow stones there. If that red stone does not go into where it, if the red stone, this last stone, ends up over here, excuse me, if that red stone ends up way over there for some crazy reason, then there's 5 points on the board for yellow. That's a lot of scoring for one end. So red makes this last shot in here. That last shot is known as the hammer. It is the most important stone because, as you can see, it can cancel out those 5 yellow stones. Or, if you needed to, you could be knocking out some of those yellow stones as well to minimize the damage. So the hammer is an advantage for one team. Now, how do you know who gets the hammer? At the beginning of the game, you get the hammer based on a coin flip. As the game continues, the red team here scored, so the hammer goes to the other team now. So the yellow team will be able to throw the last stone. Okay? And if the yellow team scores, then the red team gets the hammer. If the yellow team does not score with hammer, they keep hammer. Okay? Which can be super nice. When you have the hammer, you're trying to score at least 2 points. Okay? You don't want to just score the hammer and just make the last shot. You're trying to make at least 2 points when you have the hammer. All right, let's look at the next one. What do you think the score is for this one? The score is 0. No one gets any points for this one, and whichever team has hammer keeps the hammer. So sometimes we might get a blank. This is called a blank end. Sometimes we get a blank end unintentionally. Maybe our throws are just, no one gets one in the house. That's totally fine. But the professionals actually do this on purpose. Because let's say they have hammer and they want to score at least 2 points. Well, their last shot, it really doesn't do any good for their last shot. Let's say I'm red and I have the last shot and I come right in here and I score 1 point. Whee, I scored a point. The problem is now yellow gets hammer and they could score more than 1 point because typically a professional team will score more than 1 point if they have hammer. So sometimes if I'm red, instead of coming down here and scoring 1 point, I might throw a red rock all the way through so that no one gets any points because then I keep the hammer. Okay, so that can be an advantage for a team. When you get really skillful, that can be something that teams do. Remember today's goal, the number 1 goal today. Have fun.